today's virtual discussion. We hope that you, our community of colleagues, allies, and supporters around the globe are healthy and safe. Our offices are in New York, and today I'm speaking to you from Brooklyn, location situated upon the unceded seized territory of the Lenape and Canarsie peoples, and benefited from the economies of slavery and labors of African-descended captives. We owe our existence and vitality to generations from around the world who were brought here against their will, drawn here to escape persecution, and some that have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We pay respect to their communities past and present. This acknowledgement asks us each to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. The systemic violence and racism targeted at Black, Indigenous, and people of color is a harsh reminder of the inequities that persist in our society, particularly by the very institutions meant to protect them. AAMC condemns all violence, bias, aggression, and discrimination based on race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, and religion. It is important to listen and learn together, and to also take action to make change a reality. AAMC's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access will continue to be a driving force of all our efforts. We call upon cultural organizations and the individuals working, funding, and serving them to take action to do better. We are dedicated to an environment in which all individuals are treated with respect and dignity at our programs. Each individual has the right to be in a professional atmosphere that prohibits discriminatory practices, including harassment. Our full code of conduct policy for this webinar and all our programs, as well as the outlets to make direct or anonymous report of violation, has been posted in the chat feature. For many years, we have been presenting virtual programming and documenting live events, all of which are accessible on our website at artcurators.org or our YouTube channel. We hope they provide actionable advice, value, and connectivity. You can also stay up to date on our programming by registering for our communications. We are grateful to all our attendees for making space in their schedule to join us. I also want to acknowledge our members here today and express our gratitude to them for their dedication in being part of our community. We give thanks to our speakers for sharing their experiences and knowledge in today's candid and open forum. Thank you again for joining us. And now, to begin our program.
It's not there. Hello, everybody. First, I'd like to thank the AAMC for hosting today's webinar and welcome you all to Reimagining Art in Virtual Realms. Our webinar today will consist of individual presentations by each of our wonderful speakers, followed by general discussion and finally a Q&A section. Please do feel free to send your questions at any time during the presentation using the chat function. I would like to thank all of our speakers for joining the webinar today and give you a brief intro about each of them. For their full bios, I encourage you all to go to artcurators.org. Our first speaker, Michael Barngrover, is a senior researcher of collaboration in virtual spaces at Koç University's Karma Lab based in Istanbul, and he's a well-respected developer of cultural heritage XR projects. Tina Sauerlaender is an art historian, curator, speaker, and writer based in Berlin. She focuses on the impact of the digital and the internet on individual environments and society. And she's artistic director of the German-based VR Art Prize. She is also director and head curator of the independent exhibition platform Peer to Space and co-founder of Radiance VR, which I know she'll be talking about soon. Tina's talk is called Virtual Reality and Art, Opportunities in Crisis. Tamiko Thiel has been working for over 35 years as a pioneering artist in art and technology, whose work explores the interplay of place, space, the body, and cultural identity with a socio-political bent. Her mixed reality art has been widely exhibited in museums internationally and in media festivals and biennales as well. She has major works in the collections of MoMA and the Whitney Museum of American Art. Alfredo Salazar-Caro is a multimedia artist and co-creator and creative director of DiMoDA, the Digital Museum of Digital Art. His works are a fusion of portraiture, installation, video, and VR AR. Internationally in museums, biennales, and festivals. In this webinar, I think it's really important to just pause for a moment in our very busy lives and give ourselves permission to reimagine new ways of exhibiting and seeing art in all that that means. The speakers today will present examples of virtual exhibitions as well as mixed reality art to help guide you in considering an alternative or supplement to in real life exhibitions. I feel strongly that no matter how long the pandemic lasts, curators will continue to exhibit work virtually to maximize the dissemination of their ideas in their local communities as well as globally. Recently, I've been working on several digital initiatives, including co-founding an online mixed reality academy of art that offers courses on the fine art aspects of immersive technologies. I'm also producing an interview fireside chat series in VR. And at the moment, as we speak, I'm in the process of installing a large-scale virtual exhibition in Munich for the Medientage Festival, which opens the 24th. And I have to tell you, although there have been some tech issues, overall, working with these new technologies has been incredibly exhilarating. Whether you are an independent curator or affiliated with a museum, there could not be a better time to be discussing how XR technology can reinvigorate your programming and create better accessibility. On that note, I'm very happy to welcome our first speaker, Michael.
Thank you very much, Julie. It's my pleasure to be here. Let me go ahead and share my screen and get started. So jumping right into it, because we want to save as much time as possible for discussion afterward. It's always good to kind of just recap really quickly the terminology we'll be using frequently for those who may not be really certain what is VR and what is AR and what distinguishes them. So we'll be talking mostly probably about mixed reality. But actually, mixed reality is the space in between virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality is where something is not real. It's completely computer generated or rendered. And then augmented reality, where we're supposed to be seeing the real world and we're putting something on top. Something digital is added to that in a very simple way, usually. And mixed reality is everything in between. So that can be where we take virtual objects and we place them into our real world, or we're in a virtual space and we enhance that virtual space with elements of the real world. And the requirements to do that effectively are very different. And you'll probably see instances where you have to really control the space to do one thing very well in mixed reality. But in other cases, you're independent of the space itself because you have a pure virtual control. So moving on. Virtual exhibitions have been around for a while. Obviously, this is, however, the time where everybody's getting really excited about them. And the challenges, the questions that an exhibitor has to ask themselves are probably the exact same that they do for an in real life physical event. You know, the most important question almost always that people ask me is, how can people access this exhibition? Is it going to be something where they can click a link and it loads up? Do they have to download something? Do they need to have expensive hardware? Accessibility is probably question number one whenever we're doing a virtual event or a virtual exhibition. The next tends to be about the context. Is it appropriate? I have a work. Can I put it in the right context? How easy is it for me to change and edit and customize that environment that the work is going to be displayed in? And can I create the right experience for a viewer or a user? And this actually is very nuanced. And this is probably more complex in some ways in a virtual environment because you don't have reality to rely on. You actually have to give everything that you want to be present in the experience. And then in terms of resources, is it more expensive? Is that cost justified? And even if I have the financing, do I have the right people to do it? These are all the main questions that are critical to deciding whether or not to make a virtual exhibition a reality. And Another question that is not in that list, but is quite particular to virtual exhibitions, is the platform you're going to use and whether that platform is dedicated or it's browser-based. And this is really all about accessibility, but it also influences user experience and the context. A dedicated platform, by that I mean you have to download a specific piece of software that may have very specific hardware requirements. And this allows you to create a space. And there's many, many examples. Two of them here are Sansar, which is a free multi-user virtual platform. It supports VR, but it also supports normal computer. And we see here on the left, the Smithsonian and many other museums actually have done events in this space. And then the Kremer Museum was a custom-made environment for a specific collection that they wanted to keep together. And the main difference you're going to see when we go from a dedicated platform to a browser-based platform is that a dedicated platform can do so much more with things like lighting and that visual experience, because they're monopolizing the resources of that device, and they may only work with certain types of computers and devices. Whereas a browser-based platform, it's like a website. You can wear a headset, you can move around in space, you can do all these things, but you don't have to have very expensive equipment, and you don't have to download anything ahead of time. You can just click on a link and you can go, and this can be multi-user. And these are very popular now, but again, there's that major trade-off. There's a compromise between accessibility and experience. An example, to go in a little bit more in depth, in an example from Sansar, was this No Spectators exhibition, which was the art of Burning Man. And so they have all these high quality 3D objects. One room in particular, I mean, the detail, because they spend so much time on the rendering and they have such powerful rendering, the detail that you can have is really impressive, and you can't do this in some other platforms like a browser. Each of these notes it has legible text. It's not legible here in the video, but when you go into the platform, you can read that. That's an essential part of that work. Comparatively, you have an experience like this, which is actually the Restart exhibition, which is in Munich, and it's so much easier to get in. Everything has to be cleaner. Aesthetically, you have fewer resources you can work with, but you can still place three-dimensional objects, two-dimensional objects in videos. You can have interaction and you can have audio experiences. And this can be done, again, with a mouse click without having to really spend a lot of effort. On another side, this is a VR chat. And VR chat is a funny little platform from a social sense. And it's actually the platform that Venice International Film Festival recently chose to use. And they wanted it because it was free. And they could recreate part of Venice. You could have this sense of travel to the actual content that they were going to exhibit. And they couldn't exhibit everything, but they could exhibit some of their work in here. And they could really control the context. However, I will say that because they chose a free multi-user platform, they could control the content. They can't control the way the platform behaves socially. So it was very difficult for them to have people find each other and to keep unwanted people out. It was something that they really had to work around because they used a free platform rather than make their own. And of course, the reasons are time and accessibility. So aside from that, the thing that's consistent, no matter whether you choose a highly accessible web VR platform or a dedicated platform, the one thing that makes this different is that it's an interactive piece of software. And so you must be thinking from a UX perspective. You think about that when you have physical events too, of course. But again, you don't have reality to rely on. So you have to really think about it as a software project. And that means that you really do have to think about, do I have the right human skills to execute this? So you need a designer. That person should know about user interfaces, but should also know about user experiences. You need a technical person. They don't have to be great. They don't have to be a great programmer because these platforms are very simple to use. They're made to be used in this way, but you need someone who's comfortable working with them. And you need a manager to deal with the fact that many of the stakeholders, programmer, designer, exhibitor, artist, they don't speak the same language. So you need someone to be able to translate between them. And as we're going to share links to these later, But here's a list of platforms that anyone can take a look at, can explore whether they kind of fit. I've kind of rated them myself according to my research on a couple different characteristics. And I encourage you to give them a try and see what's already in there and see if that inspires ideas for you to use them. And here again are links more specifically to where you can find more information or examples of some of the exhibitions I showed. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That was wonderful, Michael. Our next speaker, Tamiko, is going to talk to us now from more of an artistic perspective. Welcome, Tamiko.
Thank you. And I'll go full screen here with my work. Don't worry, I'm not talking about everything. But as Julie mentioned, I started out as a product design engineer. Oh, is this, I'm hearing the audio. As a product design engineer for the Connection Machine, the first commercial AI supercomputer, and in 1989, the world's fastest supercomputer. And I consider it my first artwork, and I did get into the Museum of Modern Art in New York in 2016. You see the first exhibit here. But you can see in this piece, it was a supercomputer, but my work was not about just getting all the cables and the boards inside, but really about presence. It should be an object that really communicates to us what we thought could be an electronic brain of the future. I was using size and scale measured with respect to the human body to communicate this. This was really a new breed of machine. And it did not live on except in museums as a physical object, but its legacy lives on in Google's AI technology and in the changing sense of design that Steve Jobs brought to Apple. So let's jump to my newest piece, also an artificial intelligence installation, Lend Me Your Face, where we took one single photograph of a participating visitor's face, and by the time they made it from the entrance to the exhibit to the room where we had put up 6 screens surrounding the viewers, we had generated an animation of their face where their face was following the movements and the expressions of the driving video, in this case, a segment from Obama's Yes We Can speech. So this is the photograph, a panorama photograph of the actual space in Haus der Kunst, where it was built. But because we were afraid that the 1 week exhibition window that we had in Haus der Kunst to show it might be overruled by coronavirus restrictions, the Artists Association created a rendering, a 3-dimensional world representing the, I think, roughly 7 rooms of the space in Haus der Kunst, and arranged our various artworks within that space. It is online, and they still need to make some corrections in my piece, but it will be accessible online. It's just like the Mozilla Hubs version that Julie will be showing in the Restart exhibit. It's the Haus der Kunst replica is also a navigable space. You can walk around through the different rooms, and this enables you to deal with scale and with bodily presence. So you can walk up to the screens, you realize how large they are. In Haus der Kunst, there were 2 meters by 2 meters. In the Mozilla Hubs, it's actually even larger. So I could have just shown a video documentation of the piece in Haus der Kunst, but as a virtual reality artist since 1994, it was more interesting for me personally to really create a version of the Lend Me Your Face exhibit for this space and play around again with these features of scale and presence. So jumping back into the past, this was the first personal artwork that I finished in virtual reality. It was finished in 2000, and I'm happy to say 2 years later, it was brought into the San Jose Museum of Art permanent collection, and I can talk about archival issues of a 20-year-old virtual reality piece. Now, Today, when we say virtual reality, you'll immediately think of these stereo VR headsets. They did exist in 2000. They were large, they were clunky, and they made pretty much everyone sick in about 5 minutes or less. So I wanted groups, families, elders who had been in the Manzanar internment camp themselves to be able to come together and have the experience of walking through the Manzanar internment camp where 10,000 Japanese Americans were imprisoned in World War II. So I chose to show it because of the technology at that time, but also because I wanted to bring in these different groups as a large projection, 9 feet by 12 feet. You move with a simple joystick through the space, and the changing, shifting parallax tells your brain this is not an image, this is actually a 3D space that you are moving through. And it's not just the Manzanar internment camp, which obviously was too large to fit into any real museum, even if they gave me the whole building, but other spaces that I can switch on and off at will. So if you wander around the camp, you will discover paradise gardens like the real ones that Japanese American incarcerees really did build in Manzanar. But you'll also find the other level that my partner Zara Hushman brought in of the Iranian take on the landscape, which looks so much, even though it's in California, looks so much like the landscapes in Iran, and reflected on Iranian Americans' fear of being subject to a mass internment like the Japanese Americans were. And this was actually proposed in the Senate during the 1979 hostage crisis. Internal spaces, there we bring in a lot of archival materials that showed this were real people in a real prison camp here. These were real issues and real fears that people had. Another piece that goes even larger in scale than the 10 or so scenes in the Manzanar piece, The Travels of Mariko Horo. There I collided Buddhist cosmology and Christian cosmology, but all from the viewpoint of an Asian fictitious female artist traveling from Japan to Venice in the 12th to the 21st centuries, and was able to do multiple versions of Venice, multiple heavens and multiple hells, all in the one room of my virtual large projection installation. I moved to a different type of virtual art in 2010 when friends of mine said, hey, we're going to do an augmented reality takeover of MoMA without asking their permission, by the way. Send us some work to put up. So I created this art critic face matrix with the faces seeming to scream, AR is not art and never will be, and placed it in MoMA. And that led to, in the ensuing 10 years, led to other commissions. And I'll just show you this one in 2018 from the Whitney Museum, where Christiana Paul, the Whitney New Media Curator, asked me to create a work for the 6th floor terrace. So I and my project partner /P put the museum, so to speak, underwater. And if you walk on the terrace and view it through our app, then you see it's been taken over by these colorful corals. If you look closer, you'll realize that they're all made of plastic waste, but you can walk around them, walk up to them, and they're shifting around you constantly. So with AR, we're taking a specific location and putting a whole new layer of content, changing the meaning, reflecting on other issues that are important to us as artists. Here's kind of the other way around. It's a follow-on project called Nothing of Him That Doth Fade. And there I took one of the 3D models that I developed for Unexpected Growth and made a 3D ceramic print out of it. So it's an actual little sculpture. But if you look at it using the dedicated app, then you realize that it's only one of a huge coral reef that has taken over your room. It's just that this one has really bleached completely to white, fallen out of the virtual world into the real world. And to wrap up my presentation, I wanted to talk about another way that we're experimenting with to to bring VR art to people who don't have the hardware. InVR and Synthesis Gallery in Berlin have started a new platform to rent Oculus Go and Quest headsets. They'll ship within the EU and the UK. And their platform is called Immersive VR and Land of Cloud. My work is there with 2 other artworks. You can rent them for 1 week at a time, and InVR and Synthesis are hoping this will help people sort of get their toes wet. If they can't leave to go to a gallery, if they don't want to go out and buy, then they can rent a platform for the week to try it out. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thank you, Tamiko. That was wonderful. Our next speaker, Tina, is on.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I'll just start sharing my screen right now. It's not working. I don't know why. Sorry. Let me just try it again. Now it should work, right? Okay, so thank you so much for having me today. I will also dive right in, and I want to give you some really beautiful outlook, some opportunities in the crisis, and how virtual reality on different platforms also can contribute value to today's discussions. And I want to introduce you to 3 different projects: Mozilla Hubs, VR Art Prize, and Radiance VR. And on Hubs, I want to first introduce you to our project, Cara Agora. It's a new online art and research center funded by the European Cultural Fund. And Michael already introduced the Mozilla Hubs platform quickly. That's a platform I have been working with a lot in the past half year to create this center with amazing colleagues from different countries in Western and Eastern Europe, which you see on the slide. And as you can see here, we build a world with different platforms, which is linked then again to different rooms you can visit. Here are like many examples of our show we curated for the Mozilla Hubs platform. It's a show called Bunch of Kunst in Quarantine, Paradox Paradise, which I co-curated together with Mara Johanna Kölmel. And we created 2 different spaces that all deal with the liminality and liminal experiences artists, or we all had during the lockdown and the pandemic. So all the works deal with the current crisis and how we deal with it, and how we feel about it also, of course. And to show you how really important Mozilla Hubs became in the art scene, at least in Europe, is this project here. It's called Virtual Gallery of Reunification, which is funded by a commission of the German government. And it's an online exhibition also taking place in Mozilla Hubs, where you can find many artworks from artists living in Germany that deal with the German reunification. And I think that's also a really great example for this platform. And next, I want to talk about the VR Art Prize by the DKB in cooperation with CAA Berlin. The DKB, the German Credit Bank, decided to further dive into funding art, and especially digital art and new possibilities of artistic creation in today's world. And they decided to launch this VR Art Prize this year in May. Despite the crisis, they follow this project, and I'm the artistic director of it. We launched the open call in May. We had 104 applications of VR artists from Germany. So this prize was for artists living in Germany. And now we have 5 grand winners. You see image examples of all their works here. And I'm really happy to work with them towards our big VR exhibition that will open in February 2021, despite the crisis. Oh, that's the wrong date. So I just see this now. So keep it in mind next year. And we actually think that VR is, kind of, let's say, easy to exhibit VR in this current crisis, because I don't know how it is in the US, but the German museums offer time slot bookings. So to enter a Berlin-based museum, you have to book a time slot in advance, which is ideal if you present VR, because then you can really take care of the handling of the visitors. You can disinfect the headsets, the controllers, everything perfectly on time. And after the last month experiencing also VR shows, I can say that at least the visitors here did not hesitate to use the headset. They felt totally safe with it, at least most of them. And of course, we will do streaming of on-site events for the show. And one thing, because the discussion about sustainable art exhibitions is also an important one for this show. We only have artists living in Germany. We don't have huge travel costs, basically no travel costs. Or no travels, and we embed the virtual reality works in physical installations that are all site specifically created. So we also don't have any transport for this show. And to give you some examples how this will look like or could look like in February, I'll show you 2 examples of my previous shows, Speculative Cultures, which took place 2019 at Parsons New School in New York, where we also embedded virtual reality artworks in physical installations by the same artist and contextualized them. And another example is the exhibition The Unframed World, which took place at House of Electronic Arts in Basel in 2017, and which follows the same principle. And I can strongly also recommend you to get the exhibition catalog of this show. There are essays by many different authors about curating virtual reality also. And the last project I want to introduce you is Radiance VR, which is an international online research platform for VR in visual arts. I'm the co-founder of it, and at date we present 162 artwork documentations by 153 artists from 34 countries. We made this research website to create accessibility and visibility for VR art, to help curators find VR art pieces to showcase in their exhibitions, in their festivals. And we collaborate therefore a lot with curators, art institutions, media art festivals, and help not only to select maybe the right works, but also to help install or give advice how to install the works best if this is needed. And therefore our collaborations are really the core piece of our website. Also, of course, the artists. I present the artist list here. And we are also will be launching an app soon where some of the works will be available via the Oculus Quest headset. Yeah, that's from my side so far. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tina. Our next speaker is Alfredo.
Hello, peace, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I am speaking from unceded Wichita territory, aka Texas. And I'll get right on with my presentation. So, okay. All right, can you all see my screen? I'm hoping you can, because I can't hear you right now. Okay, I'm way back, so I'm gonna, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna talk to you guys briefly about a couple of projects. So DiMoDA, the Digital Museum of Digital Art, is a virtual reality museum that is dedicated to curating, exhibiting, developing, fomenting works in virtual reality. This project started back in 2015 in the very early days of commercial VR headsets. Seems like forever ago. It was a wonderful time back then. It was basically created out of necessity because there wasn't anything like it at the time. And a lot of people that I knew, and myself and my co-founder, William Robertson, found ourselves in this dilemma where a lot of the work that we were creating didn't really have a place in physical institutions. So we find ourselves with the need to create our own. So what you're looking at is images of the first DiMoDA building, which later on became different. So that's another one of the advantages of having a virtual institution, that you can change the architecture however you want all the time. This is the first DiMoDA exhibition at Transfer Gallery in Brooklyn, New York, back in 2015. And this is the way that we created a physical installation from this virtual reality as the first experiment. This is a bit of what it looked like on the inside, and some of the artists that participated, including Claudia Hart, Jacoby Satterwhite, and others. This is DiMoDA 2.0 at the this is at the Rhode Island Museum of Art, or no, the RISD Museum. That's right, the RISD Museum in Rhode Island. So you can see the evolution of the installation, just a little bit, cleaner, more professional, as we also developed our skill set in that regard. Here's a bit of what DiMoDA 2.0 looked like. So again, the experience that the users can have can vary from something that resembles a museum, which we were aiming for, right? Kind of like keeping the spirit of the museum alive, let's say, like yeah, I think that's a fair way of talking about it. The kind of capturing the spirit of what a museum feels like, but then completely breaking the rules simultaneously. So this is a bit of DiMoDA 3.0, which actually I'll show you now a video really fast. Hopefully you guys can all hear this. One sec. Okay.
Welcome to DiMoDA, the Digital Museum of Digital Rendon Johnson.
All my buckets have the baby on them. Muslin is made from cotton. I'm sure things like that happen to lots of people when it comes from cotton. I once
Paul Hertz. Morashin Alahiari. She knows and sees the unknown and lays them bare. She is the monstrous other, the dark goddess, Mrs. Sharon Mecklenburger.
So as you can see, we're not really interested in taking existing artworks and putting them on the wall of a virtual gallery, but rather we're interested in providing artists with the platform necessary to really use virtual reality as a medium and experiment within that and create some of the most cutting edge experiences thus far within the virtual art world. This is also some of our physicality that we add to it. So there's actual physical virtual or physical collector's items that come as part of the exhibition. So people can actually purchase these physically, and these actually contain all the data within them. So you can see the exhibition within the physical objects. Cool. And then of course, there's DiMoDA 4.0, which is currently in the works. It was intended to be released pre-pandemic, but of course the pandemic changed everything. So now we are taking our time with development, and we are, putting some love and time into it. It will have artists like Tamiko Thiel, for example, Benson Bovinkel, the German duo, Ricardo Miranda Zuniga, and Lajune Macmillan, and it's curated by Christiana Paul. So you guys can look forward to that in 2021. In the meantime, we'll be releasing DiMoDA 3.0 for download, and we'll be raising funds with that for mutual aid for Indigenous and Black people who are being affected by COVID-19. Simultaneously, I'll talk to you briefly about some of my work. Dreams of the Jaguar's Daughter is a virtual reality documentary. It's a real documentary in 3 parts that follows Achik, the spirit of a young immigrant who has traveled from Central America all the way to the US-Mexico border. And it follows her over 3 chapters. The piece is based in 3 different places: Guatemala, Central Mexico, and the Arizona desert. And it was funded and produced by the Tribeca Film Institute. One of the power of virtual reality is to produce experiences and to really allow people to understand something by being there, because of course, to your subconscious mind, there is no difference between the simulation and physical reality. This has been a project that I've been working on for several years. Really started this research in 2015, and I'm currently working on episodes 2 and 3. This is some of the footage that we took of the migrant caravan. This is the migrant caravan crossing the Suchiate River from Guatemala to Mexico. And of course, we were there with them and also recording a lot of interviews and just being present to that very intense moment. This is a little bit behind the scenes, 3D scanning and interviewing folks. And this is like the way that some of the installation has looked like. So of course, a little bit more of an involved physical installation as a background, and utilizing VR to enhance these physical installations to create a fully immersive experience, both in virtual and actual reality. There's a little bit more of that, and that's it for me. So y'all can always hit me up at alfredo@dimoda.art. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at DiMoDA or at DI_MO_DA or at TMVRTX. And that is all. So let me see, stop share. Hopefully y'all heard all of that.
We did, we heard it all. Thank you so much, Alfredo, for your contribution today. So we're doing well on time, everybody. We have 15 minutes for general questions that I will ask, followed by another 15 minutes of your questions. So if you haven't had a chance to enter any, please do at this time, or as you're hearing our conversation, it may stimulate you to type in something else. So as my first question, I'd like to ask the group, as a result of the pandemic, many museums are experiencing pressure to create digital programming. And I think it would be great to discuss how museums can reimagine exhibiting art. Who would like to go first?
I mean, I guess that's very difficult, I would imagine, because you have to work with the artist, I would assume, and that's a conversation. That's the beginning of a conversation. I imagine it's probably easier to work with a piece that's already designed for immersive, exhibition, or with a new piece, rather than if you have an existing catalog or existing library of content, to then start that conversation, to bring that in. I mean, I don't do that, but I would expect that can be a long conversation and a lot of questions and maybe difficulties finding answers to move that conversation forward to an action.
Yeah, and I also really think it's very much information. There's Zoom, there are Insta Lives, there are platforms like Mozilla Hubs, there's whole exhibitions in virtual reality like DiMoDA, there's single VR works, there's this like many different platforms, they all work differently, and I think it's really a jungle to understand the differences and then apply that what you want to your museum. but I think it's really important to experiment with all these formats. I love to see also how museums who never did something online now try Insta or Insta Talks or Zoom, or that the German government does something on hubs. It's a thing I would have never expected 1 year ago to ever happen. So it's also a lot about just trying out and testing everything. I think that's really important to do.
I wanted to.
Good. I was going to say Tamiko and Alfredo as artists. It would be great to hear your.
Actually, I want to. I posted in our internal chat a link to a wonderful New York Times article, which was an analysis of a painting. So for museum curators who actually have paintings and don't like the idea of putting the painting in some sort of online white cube, I really recommend you read this New York Times article, Seeing Our Own Reflection in the Birth of a Self-Portrait, because it's a wonderful website, only analysis of a two-dimensional painting, your self-portrait, using aspects of current web design that really allow you to give a very in-depth analysis, looking at different parts of the painting, but also bringing in images that maybe were his inspirations or that were inspired by him. So it doesn't always have to be three-dimensional. Take a look at that link and see what you can do with 2D paintings online.
Yeah, I've seen this link and it's phenomenal. I really do encourage you all to look at it. Alfredo?
So wait, can you kind of?
I'm just wondering, in your dreams, we're in this pandemic. We don't know if there's going to be multiple waves, what the realities are of us actually being able to enter into museums. And as we're rethinking what museums can be, I wonder, as an artist, if you could dream a little bit and talk about, perhaps in a virtual realm or overlapping with a virtual realm, where do you see a direction or directions that museums can take? Because you spent a lot of time with DiMoDA thinking about the positioning of the architecture of the space and things like that.
Definitely. I mean, DiMoDA is the dream of what the museum can be in virtual space. And, we were talking about this, years before it became a necessity. I mean, it's interesting to be in this moment. I feel a little bit, I don't know how to explain it, but it's funny that all of a sudden there's this pandemic and now everybody wants to make a virtual museum. And I'm just like, I already did it, I'm over it. But it's for me, what was exciting about virtual reality, and this touches a little bit into what Michael talked about, is that it gives you the possibility to create things that would otherwise be impossible, right? Installations that would either be extremely costly or just physically impossible. So for me, that's what's exciting about this. As an artist and as a curator and as a creative director and the director of a museum, this is something that excites me to think about the new possibilities. So I think in terms, of course, DiMoDA is born as a virtual institution. However, for a museum that is already existing and established, I think that there's a lot of exciting possibilities. For one, giving access to people to collections that would otherwise be inaccessible, right? I believe the Met has been doing some virtual or digitalization of their collection for a number of years now, in which they're able to 3D scan objects that would otherwise never be able to come out to the public because they're too light sensitive, or they're it would just not be safe for them to be out. And now people not just at the Met but everywhere can access those collections. So I think that those are some very exciting possibilities, and I think that every museum should be considering what their presence is in the virtual space besides just their physicality. Obviously today shows a level of necessity, right, where we can all of a sudden use things that are as simple as Mozilla Firefox, or Mozilla Hubs, I'm sorry, where previously only those who knew how to use complicated softwares like Unreal and Unity had access to creating these kinds of things. So now it's I can't remember who was saying it, that it doesn't require somebody to be too technically savvy. I mean, I would debate that. You probably want somebody that is technically savvy enough. However, it's becoming more and more accessible. So that's exciting for museums to have this kind of access now.
I think this kind of makes me think a lot about the ideas of presence and the role of the new art spectator, because there is a different possibilities now in terms of how do we see art. And just a small case example was I was installing for this virtual exhibition that opens on Saturday, and I was meeting with one of the seminal pioneers of digital art from India, Vivan Sundaram. And I was showing him the space, and we were trying to figure out the size of his screen and how it was going to work. And I had to say to him, you know, when you're thinking about your video screen, you have to understand that people may not just be standing on the ground to look at it anymore, because Mozilla Hubs has a fly feature, and you might be able to fly up. And you might be able to walk up really close to it, or see it from far away, or see it from outside of a huge doorway looking into it. So, you know, this whole notion of not being tied to physics anymore is very exciting. So I'm wondering if my panelists would like to respond to possibilities of these mediums, what it allows us to do as artists and what it allows us to do as curators that we can't do in real life.
Yeah, speaking from the curatorial perspective and working with Mozilla Hubs in the last half year, I can say it's pretty easy. So I installed the show almost entirely on my own, and I really don't have any programming skills like at all. And it's really playful and easy to use. And as Alfredo and Julie already pointed out, the possibilities you have in VR, where you're not tied to any physical laws, are just amazing. And the great thing is that you really, when you're in VR, you perceive the world as the real world. You feel the dimensions with your own body. You know, it's not like on a screen where you understand dimensions by comparison or prior knowledge. Is you really feel it in that moment, and that's really important. And also for the show, one important thing for me was again to challenge not only myself as a curator, but also challenge the artist, inviting artists who do not work digital, who haven't been working digitally before, to do a digital artwork, to maybe, you know, exhibit a 3D scan of their real life sculpture, or presenting pictures of their real life paintings. And it was really interesting to them to see how maybe the work appears when it's just really monumental, and you can perceive it as really monumental work, or how also the perception changes of a sculpture when it can maybe fly on top of you, or it does anything it wouldn't be able to do in real life. And this potential is indeed really incredible and awesome.
And Alfredo, are there things that you feel that XR technology has enabled you to do differently? I know, Tamiko, you have had a lifetime of using art, you know, technology with your art practice, but I think it sounds like a simple question, but I think it's interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, for me, because I've been working in VR since the mid-90s, and then AR since 2010, it's almost a reversal for decades. Anytime I got a request for an exhibit and tried to expand beyond the screen or beyond the smartphone display, people were saying, "Oh, no, we asked you to participate in an exhibit because we thought then we wouldn't have to spend any money on you. We wouldn't have to give you a room. We wouldn't have to give you any equipment." It's like, oh, shit. So actually, now that so many people are working virtually, and also that the idea of mixed reality or you know, mixing the real and the physical is becoming current, I'm starting to be able, for the first time since I did the connection machine back in the 80s, to bring in physical objects. And then, and in fact, that seems to be sort of the way I have to proceed, is to say, okay, as part of my VR exhibit or part of my AR exhibit, I want to have something on the walls. I want to have a painting. I want to have a sculpture, and the VR or AR is the further environment. I mean, like for instance, Nothing of Him That Fade, the small ceramic 3D print it's the physical and the virtual are part of the same universe. It's just that we can't necessarily see the virtual or the augmented part of it without using some sort of device. So I think that's also something that interests a lot of museum curators that I've talked to, is how, for instance, if we've got a collection of artifacts or pre-modern artifacts or 3D objects from a different culture, how can we give our visitors an idea of how this was used, how this was part of a culture that they do not know. And actually my Travels of Mariko Horo virtual reality piece, I used a lot of segments from Giotto's Last Judgment in Padua, lots of different things in Venice, in Palazzo Ducale and Basilica San Marco, but also lots of Buddhist imagery, and brought them into this 3D space and mixed them up in a so to speak, an alien context where I was clashing together Christianity and Buddhism. So that's maybe more than the most curators will want to go with their objects, but they can also, of course, if they've got a Buddhist object, then they can work to create a virtual space that puts that object in a context that would be very hard to convey otherwise. And this is on scale with Alfredo's expanding the world, but it's giving an experience that you can't get when you go into that museum and see that object in real life.
Alfredo, do you want to respond to that? Because I feel like it's so relevant for your current project with Dreams of the Jaguar's Daughter. And that's going to lead into our next question, which is going to be about how XR technology can help everybody with issues of diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion.
Yeah, so that's a lot. But I'll start with a earlier question about possibilities. I mean, there's just a lot of really exciting things with these types of tools. I think it's really important. Well, I'll start with the positives, I guess. For me, the exciting thing about it is, again, being able to realize visions that would be otherwise impossible to recreate in a physical environment. I was just in New Mexico and West Texas, and I have a drone with me, and I fly it around, and I capture giant mountains and things like this, and I can create these amazing environments that I would otherwise not. I mean, how do you bring a mountain to a gallery? You can fake it, you can try, you can put a picture of it, or you can try to make an installation that looks similar to it, but you'll never be able to feel what it's like to stand in front of this mountain. But virtual reality actually gives you probably one of the closest semblances to it, right? Like Tina was saying, when you get this sense of absolute presence. And of course, this has been evolving over the years very rapidly. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have tried Quest 2, but Quest 2 is amazing. Even Quest was amazing. And it's incredible the level of immersion that you can get from these devices. Of course, that's also the danger that they represent, right? Because we're talking about art, but there's a number of other applications that could be used that have potential very real dangerous ramifications. But nonetheless, I think that for me as an artist, again, creating a sense of presence within my imagination, within my vision, is the most powerful thing. I always say that if the surrealists had access to VR, they would have been all over it, because they have given us this small window to their insane visions that we can stare at and be like, oh wow, like these guys were tripping on something. But now we have this capacity to just completely, you know, immerse people within these visions in a level that is unprecedented in human history. So that's what's exciting to me about the technology.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just a very, I mean, we all could be talking about this for a long time. I'm looking at our time. We have about 15 minutes left. And I did want to talk briefly about that question before we move on to some others about DEAI and how XR technology can help with museums to access communities and the global world that normally they might not have as much access to. And I feel like that is an all panelist question.
Well, one thing that I notice happening right now is that, you know, very often a panel or a discussion, basically you only draw on local artists because they can come in and be there. And if you're not, essentially, if you're not in New York, then you're not involved. But now, since people can't necessarily come in person anyway, I have the feeling that people who are setting up panel discussions or artist discussions are looking a lot further afield, and I'm hoping that they'll look not just to, you know, from like the US to Europe, but also go to other countries, other time zones, and look in, you know, inside of you know, artists that are maybe living in cities that don't have vigorous international art scenes. So that's one way.
Tina, Alfredo, Michael.
Yeah, I mean, as Tamiko said, the digital tools, they give you access to or the possibility to talk to many different people across the world and include them in your events. Also, doing online exhibitions, you can include easily digital artworks from artists from all around the globe, and that's amazing, and that's what I've been also working with in the past years. But in the end, DAI is also about having really networks, strong networks to different kinds of people, and these tools, digital tools, they can help you, of course, access and reach out to these people. But it's really important to build reliable networks, to talk, to listen, and yeah, to educate yourself also. And for me, it's striking that now there are two main questions asked by curators are like, where do I find digital artists who do digital art? And the other is, how can I include more diversity in my shows? And kind of these two questions for me coincide at this very particular moment of time, which is really interesting for me. And also, virtual reality also creates barriers, right? So it's for people who cannot see, it's not so easy to access virtual reality. And luckily, there are companies like Equal Entry who create, how is it called, audio transcriptions or audio versions of virtual reality work, so that also this access could be enabled. And there are just many aspects we have to think about when it comes to this topic.
I want to add something about projects that I've been doing in augmented reality. It started back in, I think 2012 or so, when I got in contact with the Caribbean Cultural Center and African Diaspora Institute in East Harlem in Manhattan, still the poorest part of all of New York City. And at a point when the art world was, you know, art world panels were saying, well, augmented reality, that's horribly elitist. I mean, who's going to have a smartphone apart from you know, us and a couple of other rich people like us? I met the director of the CCC ADI, and she said, oh, that's amazing. This will enable us to put, you know, Puerto Rican American art from East Harlem on our own streets. We can, you can train our own artists to create the works. And that's what we did for a couple of years. Well, it took longer than a couple of years. 2016, the exhibit came out, unfortunately, on a platform that no longer exists. So that plus my platform that I was using going out of business led me and my husband, Peter Graff, to create the ARPOIS open source AR platform. And right now we're working with the Asian American community in San Jose in California to do a similar sort of project where we're training their artists from the Japanese American, Chinese American, and Filipino American community, all of whom have history in San Jose, Japantown, to create their own artworks and put them on the streets of San Jose, Japantown, where that happened. I'm talking to Boston Cyber Arts about working with them in Boston in 2021, and with the CCC ADI in East Harlem to come back and bring them onto the ARPOIS platform, so those artworks that they created, their artists created, can live on. So augmented reality is a way to really bring the art to the people, and also bring the artists in the community into the virtual and the augmented sphere. So I would really encourage, if you want to look at diversity, then do that sort of AR project. It's almost pretty much everyone has a smartphone. You don't need a whole lot of equipment. It's not isolating. You're there on the streets with other people. You can make the artworks either small and simple or large and complicated, and it really makes for an art exhibit for that community in which you place it, or you can travel it to some other place around the world. Obviously, then you need more supporting materials to transfer from one culture to another. But I think that's really, augmented reality is really one area where you can address the problem of diversity and access very easily.
And Alfredo and Michael, did you have comments?
Yeah. I mean, I actually would maybe disagree with Tamiko's points there, just because I feel like, not so much her broad point. If you build for a broad audience, then you will be able to access a broad audience. But there is this issue of standardization. When we're digitizing anything, we're now standardizing it. So we're kind of almost, I think, necessarily constraining an artist. Again, I'm not an artist, so maybe I'm speaking, completely off topic, but when we're standardizing the distribution, I feel like that's the tools are, not to say that the form of expression is diminished, but the tools that are being offered are diminished. And the ways that those can be experienced are also diminished, because we're working with one type of, like if it's a phone, for example. One of the reasons why I personally just don't consider AR a very good medium now from a user experience is that the screen is so small. You have to hold it with your hand. There's little to no interactivity. And if you go for maximum mobile phone usage, then you're limited to mostly QR triggers. And I feel like it's easy to say that this is, I don't know. I'm just not, I hear the argument a lot for maximum accessibility, and I just don't think that is as easy, because I think that the diversity of hardware is more complex than people assume when they go into that type of project. And I wanted to bring up this issue of, again, just standardizing when we're selecting one particular type of platform that we're going to distribute from. Then this also, it's just very limiting. I'm not a huge fan of it, to be honest.
I've addressed some of those.
I've seen where people, it's the most amazing thing, because people, for example, at VR Ham, which is a VR festival that's dedicated to artistic experiences and art, and they had an AR piece in the middle of the plaza, the public plaza, and you just see people of all different ages going and scanning that barcode, whipping out their phones and laughing. And I feel like it's quite something to see this in public practice. And I do agree with Tamiko that that is a pretty valuable tool. I'm wondering, Alfredo, if you have anything to add, because we are, believe it or not, in our last 3 minutes of conversation. I was actually hoping to talk a little bit about collection and conservation of mixed reality art, because I thought that would be useful. But it seems like, you know,
may I address?
I'll just make a quick point.
Sure.
Kind of speaking more towards diversity specifically, I think it's the moral responsibility of institutions as gatekeepers to make sure that they are addressing their inherent white supremacist views, right? The museum for hundreds of years has been exclusively Eurocentric, mostly around the world. So now we're in a place where we must rid ourselves of that or be on the wrong side of history, period. So regardless of whether or not we are using AR, VR, I think it's very important for the museums all around the world and for curators all around the world to be uplifting voices of people of color. With DiMoDA, as a general rule, we never show less than 50% women and less than 50% people of color. And I think that, you know, this is a very low bar, as a matter of fact. So I think that when we uplift these voices, we get perspectives that we wouldn't normally get. And then we get a more complete picture of what the state of actual creativity is, whether it be in this continent or in Europe or wherever. So I think that's something really important to be aware of. And I do agree with Tamiko, you know, AR is a more accessible technology to most people, but even in New York City, there are pockets within the city where people don't have smartphones, people don't have access to the internet. So this is something that, you know, of course, this is not the responsibility of museums to address, but it is yet another way of understanding how systematic oppression affects people's access to things like museums. And again, if museums uplift the voices of people of color, then those audiences would also come to you. I can tell you from personal experience and from many of my personal friends that they don't feel like museums are places where they can go to because they see it as something that is exclusive to white people. However, again, when the curators uplift these voices, then the people will come. So that's all I wanted to share.
Can I say something before we end?
It's 1:13, so we have literally 1 minute left, and I'm about to thank everybody. So,
right.
Did you want to say something?
I did. I wanted to say, Michael, you were talking about one form of AR. There's geolocative AR. And it works on all sorts of smartphones, not just the latest and greatest. And that's exactly the reason why a museum in the poorest community of all New York was so excited by it, because they say we can provide smartphones if you don't have one. We can do a museum exhibit for an underserved minority community that will never go into a white space, and will also not put on a $300 VR headset. So and like I said, the platform that I'm creating with my husband is addressing those issues of accessibility and longevity, and being able to use a wide variety of smartphones. So I think I take serious issue with what you said about AR, and I've just seen it in the Puerto Rican African American community in New York, and now in the Asian communities of San Jose. And they're not all rich people there. Not all Asians are rich.
Well, I think that.
As a poor Asian, I do appreciate that clarification. I mean, I guess we'll just have to disagree on. I think
let's talk. Let's talk. Let's not disagree. Let's talk with each other.
You guys can talk about it.
Yeah.
After the panel.
Yeah.
So I do want to take this opportunity to say that I really do believe that XR technology can help programs and museums immensely. And I encourage you all to go to the resources that we've posted in the chat. There's all kinds, ranging from definitions to exhibitions to check out. And I want to thank my panelists who are all wonderful. I so appreciated you being here today. And of course, the AAMC for hosting this webinar. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the next webinar. Thanks again.
Hello, I'm Monica Valenzuela, Program Manager for AAMC and AAMC Foundation. Thank you for joining our program today, and a special thanks to our speakers for sharing their experience and expertise with us. A recording will be available on our website, artcurators.org, and our YouTube channel shortly. Please help support our capacity to continue programs such as today's event by making a donation today. A gift of any amount will have a direct impact on our work. Thank you, stay well, and join us again soon.